What is your childhood memory that you thought was normal but realized it was traumatic later in your life? Always hungry. Growing up, I had a condition called phenylketonuria. It is a genetic disorder that requires a very strict diet. I had a list of foods I could never eat, plus books that told me exactly how much of certain foods I was allowed to have. Most of the time, I had to pack my own meals to take everywhere, even if I was just going to a friend's house. Things took a turn for the worse when my parents split up. My mom kicked my dad out, got custody of me and my siblings, and then pretty much stopped caring. She made sure I followed the rules of my diet, but she never made sure I was actually getting enough food to keep me going. At the worst of it, my daily meals looked like this. A tiny bowl of cereal in the morning, about 25 grams. Some slices of cucumber, an apple, a carton of apple juice, and maybe an orange, though I could never get through it because the stringy texture made me gag. Dinner was usually a small portion of whatever my family had eaten the night before, with the parts one could not eat removed. That was it. Day after day for more than a year. During school holidays, it got even worse because my mom had to make my lunch herself, and she often just did not bother. I was only 9 years old. I could not eat most snacks, could not have bread, could not eat chips, and there was rarely any fresh food at home. I got so desperate that sometimes I would dig through the trash and eat whatever my brother had thrown out. My mom smoked, so half the time it tasted like ash, but I was too hungry to care. I honestly believed that everyone with my condition had to live like this, that constant hunger was just part of it. My mom had a way of twisting things, making me think that so many problems were my fault. Her failed marriage, her bad relationships, her losing jobs, even my dad's illness. Then, a year later, I moved in with my dad's parents. They were the typical loving grandparents. They made sure I had plenty of food, cooked bigger portions, looked up special recipes for my condition, and even changed some of their own recipes so I could eat them. They showed me where my food was and let me help myself. I went from being dangerously underweight to almost overweight in no time. Still, it did not fully click until I was 16. My specialist doctor arranged for me to meet other adults who had my condition, so I could see that life could be better. While we were talking, I asked how they handled the constant hunger when they were kids. They all looked at me like I had grown a second head. Every single one of them said they had never been hungry growing up. My doctor told me the same thing. That is when it hit me. My mom had not been doing her best. She had been neglecting me. For years, I thought she was trying her hardest to be a good mother. But the truth was, she just did not want to put in the effort. Even now, I have this strange ability to go without eating for far too long, sometimes days, because I am still used to ignoring hunger. Most of the time, I have to be reminded by other people that I should eat. My dad's fight and my own. This story is a bit long, but I wanted to share it even if no one reads it. For most of my childhood, things were pretty normal. My parents were happily married. My mom stayed home for about 6 or 7 years after having my sisters. I was almost 2 years older than the oldest. We lived in a nice house in the suburbs. Everything seemed good and regular. My dad worked a lot for an international tech company. Sometimes he missed events like sports games because of work or trips, but when he was home, he spent all his free time with us. We had big parties with friends and their kids, and adults would drink and talk while we played. For 4th of July, we threw big parties with blow-up water slides and all kinds of fun. Then middle school hit and everything changed. My dad got laid off when his company outsourced his job. I later learned his business trips were about firing his friends and hiring people overseas. A month or two after that, my grandpa, my dad's dad, passed away. They were really close. The next few years were rough. My dad fell hard into alcoholism. He'd always had a problem with drinking, using it to cope, but he'd stayed functional until then. My parents tried to hide it, but it got so bad they couldn't anymore. He'd drink a whole fifth of vodka and pass out on the living room floor for days. We stopped having guests over. My mom and him became toxic to each other, and my sisters were angry with him too. I felt like he had no one but me and family hours away. He bounced between living in other places and rehab, getting better then relapsing again and again. I was the only person he could talk to. We'd have long talks in the basement where he stayed. I was young and mostly quiet because I was so emotional and couldn't open up. He told me once, when I was in 8th grade, that he wanted to kill himself. That terrified me. I was scared every day that I'd come home first and find him dead. I didn't tell anyone because I didn't know what to do, and I didn't want to break his trust. Sometimes I understood why my sisters and mom felt the way they did, like when he drove me and a friend drunk twice. I was 12 and didn't know what else to do but get in the car. I still feel ashamed for letting that happen. Years went by. He couldn't keep a job and went to rehab more times. For a long while, he lived in a sober house about 40 minutes away but came home every day when he wasn't working. He was the perfect dad except for the drinking. He listened, supported me, gave me freedom and genuinely loved me. High school was better, but he wasn't clean yet. At the end of my sophomore year, he got a DUI in my car. Some friends saw him getting cuffed after school. He went to jail for 32 days instead of paying fines. When he got out, I just started junior year, and he got to watch me play in my first varsity soccer game. That made me proud. One time, my sisters and I came home and saw a delivery guy leaving our garage. I knew what was happening and told my sisters to stay in the car while I ran inside. I found my dad desperately trying to drink before I could stop him. He was physically and mentally addicted, like a heroin addict needing a fix. We fought over the alcohol and some got spilled on both of us. We lay in his room for an hour until my mom got home. He cried and begged me not to leave or hate him. He was like a scared child. It was hard to see someone I'd looked up to so broken. That was the last time he drank. He's been clean for over 2 years now. Things aren't perfect, but my parents are doing better, and my sisters and dad get along mostly. We're less social than before, but we're functional. He has 2 jobs and even works as a local politician fighting oil interests in our suburban town. After he got sober, I realized how messed up I was. I'd focused so much on him, thinking everything would get better if he stayed clean. But I hadn't realized how depressed I'd been since middle school or how I'd shut down emotionally because I hid his alcoholism from everyone outside our family. Even now, when I'm stressed or depressed, I sometimes just stop feeling anything at all. Senior year of high school was tough. I was deeply depressed but still did well in school and soccer, so no one knew. After a tough breakup, I felt alone and started drinking and smoking to cope. Around Thanksgiving, I planned to kill myself. I picked out a knife but got too scared to go through with it. I didn't sleep that night but went back to school the next day. Months later, I opened up, started antidepressants, got into a healthy relationship, and got better. I still struggle every day, but I try to improve. My parents don't know I plan to kill myself. I'm almost done with my first year of college, 10 hours away from home. I lived in that house for 18 years and wanted to get farther than the nearby university. I actually went to my dad's alma mater and pledged his old fraternity, not just because of him. I'm a lot like him, except I'm blonde with green eyes. Sometimes I'm scared I'll fall into the same hole he did, but I'm determined not to. I don't know how to end this, but I'm proud of my dad. I love him and we're close. We don't say I love you much, but it's there. I hope he knows how proud I am of him. Not every parent. When I was a kid, even the smallest slip-up could get me a brutal beating. What messed with my head the most back then was how it never mattered how serious the mistake was. The punishment was always the same. If I came home with a failing grade, I got a vicious beating. If I forgot to take out the trash, I got the exact same beating. There was never any difference. I was almost 15 when something happened that completely shook what I thought I knew. I went to a friend's house one afternoon, and not long after I got there, his mom came in furious. The school had called her, and she found out he had tried to fake her signature on some papers. That was the kind of thing that would have left me bruised and barely able to move. I was already thinking about heading home because I did not want to witness what I was sure was coming next. But instead, after yelling at him, she hugged him. She told him she was more disappointed than angry, and that they needed to work on things together. I sat there thinking, what on earth just happened? Where was the beating? That was the day I learned that not every parent thinks the answer to every mistake is to beat a kid half to death. Just mine did. And to be fair, I know it was not only my parents. I have since met plenty of people with similar childhoods. To anyone else who grew up like that, my respect goes out to you. We made it through. We are still standing, and we are stronger for it, no matter how hard it was. The plan. When I was 11 years old, my parents stepped in to help a woman escape from her violent husband. He was a dangerous man, the kind you would never want to cross paths with. Even after she got away, he was still out there somewhere, and nobody knew exactly where. We had heard that he had made some very real threats toward my family. My mother sat me down one day and explained exactly what I was supposed to do if he ever came into our home. First, I was to grab my younger brothers and sisters and hide with them inside the closet. She would go outside to distract him and lure him toward a specific spot in our backyard that she had already planned out. Once I heard them leave, I was to take the shotgun from the closet and be ready to use it on him. At 11 years old, I was being trained to end a man's life if it came down to protecting my family. I never had to pull that trigger, but I was ready. The nursery rhyme. When I was little, my mom would let me skip school sometimes so we could visit my older sister in the hospital. We would have what she called hospital campouts. I would sleep in my sister's bed, and my mom would sleep in the recliner chair that was meant for parents. At the time, I thought it was just something fun we did together. Now I understand why. Everyone, doctors, social workers, child psychiatrists, even family friends, had told my mom to make as many happy memories for me with my sister as possible, because she might not live much longer. But that is not the part that stuck with me the most. During those hospital stays, my mom had me learn a special nursery rhyme. She would sing it to me, then have me sing it back over and over. It was set to the tune of Hickory Dickory Dock, because she knew I liked it from watching the children's show Play School. She chose that song because it was one I loved but not one I would hear at school. So there was no chance a teacher might ask me to play it on a recorder and notice the words were different. She drilled it into my head so much that I can still remember parts of it today. The first verse was about my dad, that he was abusive and that I could not be sent to live with him. The second verse gave my godmother's name and phone number, and told me she had proof of the abuse and would take me in. Now I know the truth. My father was extremely violent toward my mother. She was trying to prepare me in case he killed her. No matter if it looked like an accident or not, she wanted to make sure I could tell the police that he had hurt her, that I had a safe place to go, and who to call. I learned that rhyme when I was 4 years old. Looking back, I guess it was the only way she could make sure a small child would remember such important information. My mom later told me she does not see herself as a hero. She still feels guilty for not knowing my father was also hurting my brother and me. She thought she had taken the blows for us so we could see the good side of our father. She was stuck in an impossible position. She could not work because my sister needed her full-time care. Yet she had to rely on my father's income to pay for my sister's treatments. Every choice she made was with her 3 kids in mind. Today, my sister is doing well, my mom, my brother, and I are safe, and while we carry the scars, we are healing together. The godmother whose number I memorized, the one who helped us get out, passed away earlier this month. I will not share the words of that rhyme. The first few lines come to me without thinking, but trying to recall the rest would drag me back into a place I do not want to revisit. Some memories are better left alone. The tile war. When I was about 5 or 6, my grandmother and my stepdad got into one of the biggest fights I have ever seen. Both of them had short tempers and would blow up fast, and my grandmother was the kind of person who liked to be in control of everything. One day, she was talking to my mom and stepdad about the bathroom floor tiles. She asked if they were ever going to replace them. We were broke, so my stepdad flat out said no. My mom said maybe when they could afford it. My grandmother, however, really wanted those tiles changed. So one day, when my mom and stepdad were both at work, she came over and ripped up the entire bathroom floor. When my stepdad got home, my grandmother said, "You should appreciate me more. I just spent all day on my hands and knees doing men's work for you." He was furious. He asked her why she did it, and she shot back, "You should appreciate me. Forget you." Only she did not say forget. Then she flipped him off. That is when the shouting started. The things they yelled at each other were wild. My sister and I were both there, and years later, when we talked about it, we remembered different highlights. My grandmother picked up a small axe she had been using to break the tiles and said, "Do not make me use this on you." My stepdad ripped a picture of Jesus off the wall, shoved it in her face, and said, "I bet this burns you, you devil." My grandmother fired back. I bet you wish you were half the man I am. It all ended with my grandmother storming out. We did not talk to her for months after that. I used to joke with my sister that when she passed away, we should put that same picture of Jesus at her funeral. For the record, the tiles did get replaced. I later found out my mom had told my grandmother we could not replace them because no one had the time to do the work. So in a way, it was my mom's fault she went ahead and did it. My grandmother had always thought my stepdad was not very manly, especially compared to her boyfriend or my father. She was not wrong. He was terrible at house repairs and would get furious if someone else did them. I once put together our lawnmower because the last one he assembled without reading the instructions literally blew up. When he found out, he threw me against the wall. The joke about putting the Jesus picture at her funeral came much later. After she passed, while we were planning her service, I saw that same picture. I asked my sister if it was the one from the tile fight. She said yes. I asked if it would be too much to put it up at the service. She laughed and thought it was funny. My grandmother, for all her faults, was actually a very sweet woman, just not the brightest when it came to helping. She always meant well, but her help could be a disaster. Once, she noticed my sister's Furby toy was dusty, so she decided to wash it. The poor thing never spoke again. She just never liked my stepdad, and honestly, he made it easy. He was mean to everyone and had a temper over the smallest things. Once, when I was in the intensive care unit and we were not sure I would make it through the night, he tried to start a fight with my real dad because he was standing near the bathroom door on purpose, knowing I would not want to ask him to move, which meant I would have to ask for his help. The hero who wasn't. When I was a kid, I thought it was totally normal for police officers and child protective services to show up at our house all the time. Whenever they came, my parents would send my sisters and me upstairs, and we were told never to come down unless they called us. My parents taught us that police were bad people and we should never talk to them. They even came up with a challenge and password system in case we were ever abducted by the police. To us kids, it felt like some secret spy game, but looking back, I realized it was anything but normal. As I got older, I started noticing other things that didn't add up. My dad spent endless hours on his computer. This was in the 90s, back before most people were online much. He would have sudden fits of rage, smashing dishes, breaking toys, even destroying his own computer. Sometimes it was so bad that we had to hide from him until it was over. Everything came crashing down when I was 14. My dad was convicted of molesting 2 boys at a Bible camp I had attended for years. Up until that moment, I had seen him as my hero, the man who protected me from evil police and social workers. Learning the truth about him turned my entire world upside down. I later learned that my dad had post-traumatic stress disorder and dissociative identity disorder from things that had happened to him as a child. He was sent to prison. I have never spoken to him since, but there are still times I worry he might try to find me. Now my wife is pregnant, and all I can do is hope to be a better man than he ever was. Twice the man if I can. Blood, teeth, and the Mississippi. I should probably start by saying my childhood wasn't exactly picture perfect. My mom had my oldest sister when she was just 16, and then had me when she was 40. Big age gap, whole different worlds. One weekend, I stayed with my oldest sister in the city. She had a bunch of little kids, and I was about the same age as my nieces and nephew, give or take a year or two. At some point, one of them started fussing about a loose tooth, and before I knew it, we were all standing in a quiet little line in front of her boyfriend, Billy. He always acted sweet when my parents were around, but when they weren't there, he was just plain mean. That's when I realized why everyone had gone so quiet. Billy had a pair of pliers in his hand, and he was yanking loose baby teeth out of our mouths, one by one. At the time, it just felt like another lousy thing in a long list of lousy things, but looking back now, yeah, it was messed up. Another time, I was maybe 6 years old, my nephew was 5, and for some reason, we were allowed to wander the streets of my sister's neighborhood in South St. Louis. If you're thinking that's not exactly the safest place for little kids, you're right, especially back in 77 or 78 when crime was everywhere. We ended up near the coal piles at Peabody Coal Yard when a rush of sirens screamed past us. Being curious kids, we followed the noise for a couple blocks and came upon something I'll never forget. There, in the middle of the street, was a man covered in blood and glass. Police cars surrounded him, lights flashing, sirens still wailing. He was moaning in this way that made my stomach knot up. A grown man crying like a little kid. "Mama! Mama! I want my mama!" He sobbed. We stood there and watched him die right there in the street, still calling for her. About 10 years ago, I was having a drink with that same nephew. I asked him, "Hey, do you remember that guy who got hit by a car when we were little?" His eyes lit up, then fell. "Yeah, I do," he said. "That really happened, right?" "Yeah. I completely forgotten about it until now." "Me too. He died, didn't he?" "Oh, for sure." And just like that, 30 years later, a memory we'd both shoved way down came rushing right back. Billy, though? Nobody forgot him. Last I heard, he went on a fishing trip on the Mississippi and never came back. And no, before anyone asks, I didn't have anything to do with it. My nephew and I have joked about how dying on a fishing trip is the perfect cover for murder. But that's all it is, a joke. Truth is, I haven't seen that guy since I was a kid. And that's just fine by me. The car and the chips. Every single time my dad picked me up from school, he would leave me sitting alone in the car for over 3 hours. He would go inside the local bar and get drunk, leaving me with nothing to do but sit there and wait. When he finally came back after those long hours, he'd start the car and toss me a bag of chips like it was some kind of prize. Back then, I honestly thought I was the luckiest kid in the world just to get those chips. I did not realize how big of a deal it was until this story got such an overwhelming response. Reading everyone else's stories and support showed me just how many of us went through things like this. The world has its ugly parts, sure, but it also has some incredibly kind and beautiful people. That's what makes places like Reddit so special. So many good people ready to listen and care. For anyone else who shared similar experiences, I hope you find some peace knowing you're not alone. It's been a comfort for me, too. And for those of you who feel guilty, anxious, or like you don't measure up because of what your dad did or didn't do, just know this. You are not alone. You are worthy of happiness, and you deserve the space you take up in this world. Let this be the reason you choose to do better for your own kids. You're worth it. A complicated childhood. I guess there's a lot to say about my childhood. One of my earliest memories is waking up in the middle of the night just so my dad could beat me with a belt for leaving a pair of shoes on the closet floor. I never understood why he checked then, but that's how it was. One time, my sister and I woke up to our mom cooking ground beef directly on the stove coils without a pan. She decided to ditch that and go to McDonald's instead. Being about 6 years old, I got in the car excited for a happy meal. My older sister, who was around 9, begged me not to go because she sensed something was wrong. We only made it a few blocks before she hit a sign and had to turn around, coming back without any food. Later, my sister told me she had been pacing outside, hoping we'd come back safe. Looking back, we might have been even younger than I thought, but I don't know how I remember so far back. I used to play with drug scales as a kid, not really understanding what they were for. Family gatherings weren't your usual kind of get-togethers. They included pit bull fights, adults smoking blunts, and violent movies with graphic scenes playing on huge TVs. The smoke was never kept away from us kids. When I started smoking weed as a teenager, I suddenly realized how much I had been exposed to it as a child. Felt like I'd been high my whole childhood. My childhood was complicated. It all seemed normal to me until we started going to church, and things got complicated in a whole new way. Harry Potter was considered witchcraft, so I wasn't allowed to read it. Secular music wasn't allowed either. Maybe Creed was okay, but that was about it. I didn't realize how far from normal all this was until I hit my early teens. My family still struggles with drugs and a lot of dysfunction. My mom passed away last year, but I love her despite all the mistakes she made raising me. I turned out okay, all things considered, and I try not to let those childhood experiences define who I am. Luckily, my husband and his family showed me what normal really looks like.